I'm Sensei John Small, and today I want to talk to you about strengthening and conditioning. We'll discuss some of the principles behind it. To begin with, I want to mention the benefits. Obviously, you get stronger. You get stronger in your muscles, you get stronger in your tendons and your ligaments. Most people understand those things. Not as many recognize that it can be a wonderful way to help strengthen up your bones. You're putting your bones under a lot of stress when you're working with resistance. So that really helps to strengthen those up. Helps to strengthen your heart up, improves your energy levels, helps improve your posture, makes your work or your job easier when you're working anything physical. You tend to be combat ready, as I might call it. You're ready for whatever stresses that life's going to throw at you. When you're in better shape, you're better able to absorb blows that you might have to take. You feel better psychologically. People, when they're in better shape, tend to feel better about themselves. And you also can serve as an inspiration to others. So all of those are some of the many benefits of engaging in strengthening and conditioning training. Let's talk a little bit about the safety. If you're new to it, or you have pre-existing conditions, you should probably consider consulting a doctor before engaging in any real rigorous activity. Children should approach it not with the idea of working at high intensity levels, as in heavy weights. You want to keep the weights lighter, higher repetitions, thinking really to concentrate on developing form and technique during the younger years, really up until you get through puberty. Part of the reason for that is because of the growth plates in the bones. They can stand to have problems if they're put under too much stress. So that can cause development issues. So just stay in low intensity, concentrating on technique until after puberty. Making sure that you're warming up and stretching out well before activity, get the muscles loosened up enough. Proper form, proper technique. You'll hear me emphasize it continuously. So important for making sure that you're staying safe in your activity and not putting yourself at risk for injury. Working with a safe weight as well, making sure that you're not going too heavy and working your way down to where you ought to be. Rather go too light and work your way up, even if it means it takes longer to discover where you should be. That way you're doing more to eliminate the risk of injury for yourself. Various aids, lifting aids, lifting belts, braces, that kinds of things. Those are considerations. I'll probably discuss that topic more in depth in the future, but certainly if you're starting to, for example, lift things that are heavier for a job, or you're concerned that you might be at risk at all, it doesn't hurt to always have a weight belt or something to put on, for example. And then there are environmental considerations. Primarily in exercising, it's usually heat that tends to be an issue or cause for concern. Heat exhaustion and heat stroke are concerns you need to deal with. Making sure that you're taking plenty of water is a big factor in helping to prevent that. But also being aware of yourself, how hard you're exerting yourself, and dressing appropriately for the occasion. And that can be particularly important too in the wintertime if you're dealing with the potential of cold as an issue. Make sure that you're dressing in a way that allows your moisture to escape, so that you don't find yourself wet and then really at risk. But these are things I might cover in the future in some of the videos. Types of muscles that you have, let's get into that. You have a different composition of your muscle fibers. You have slow, generally speaking, slow and fast twitch muscle fibers. The slow are geared more toward endurance type activities, and the fast are power, explosive strength movements. Different people have different ratios of each, and a lot of that's genetic. If you really think about the difference between a high caliber sprinter and a marathon runner, you can see the two extremes. That's not to say that you can't affect the ratio and the composition through strengthening and conditioning training. But generally speaking, you tend to be more of a slow twitch or more of a fast twitch type of build. Then there's the various muscle contractions. You want to have a familiarity of those. There are positive and negative contractions. You may have heard those terms. What those mean are that when you're going through a positive contraction, what that means is the muscle is shortening while it's contracting. So here we're speaking of my bicep muscle. If I'm doing a bicep curl, as I'm bringing the dumbbell up, the bicep is shortening. So that's the positive contraction. As I'm bringing the dumbbell back down, that's the negative contraction. The muscle is lengthening. So you want to be familiar with what those are. There's isometric contractions, which essentially means that the muscle is not lengthening or shortening as it's contracting. So here, primarily my pectoral muscles are engaged if I'm pushing my hands against each other, and they're not moving, they're static, so they're neither lengthening nor shortening. So that's an isometric contraction. Now there's isokinetic contractions, which means that the muscle is encountering the same amount of resistance throughout the range of motion. That's not something I can really illustrate because I would need like a physical therapy type machine. I suppose if you're doing an action underwater, that would achieve an isokinetic sort of resistance or contraction of muscle. But I can demonstrate an isotonic contraction, which means that when the muscle is lengthened, or when the muscle is contracting, it's encountering a changing amount of resistance. So if I use the 15-pound dumbbell to demonstrate this, you may think, well, how is that a changing amount of resistance if it's a 15-pound dumbbell? The weight doesn't change. It's because of physics and leverage that changes the resistance. So as I go down through the negative contraction, at this point, I'm at the maximum amount of resistance perpendicular up. When I change the angle, I have less of an angle here. Same goes for here. So, if I'm 45 degrees up from parallel to the ground, about half of that energy is really going downward and just being supported through my bone and the leg. So you're really only at about half the resistance when you're at the 45-degree mark. You're at 100% of the resistance perpendicular out. So that's how the resistance changes throughout the range of motion. So that's an isotonic contraction. Most of your free weight movements are of that sort. So when you're working, I spoke about working with a safe weight, making sure that you work your way up to the weight. And it's really important to make sure that you're controlling the weight throughout the range of motion. That's how you make sure that you don't risk the injuries when you're in control of the weight, especially that negative contraction, because as you come out and that muscle lengthens up, it's really coming up to the end of its extension here, and if the weight's got control of you, then you risk overextending, causing injuries to the joints, the softer tissues, the ligaments and the tendons and the muscle itself can be at risk. So you always want to make sure you're controlling the weight. If you're having a hard time doing that, or you're having a hard time keeping good form, then you want to think about possibly going to a lighter weight. When do you go up in weight? Well, there are three considerations for that. First, as I say, you want to make sure that your form is spot on. You have your form really good through all your repetitions and sets. That's the first thing. The second thing is that your soreness is minimal after your workouts. Within the day or two after, you're not experiencing much soreness at all. And the third consideration is that you're psychologically ready in your mind. If you think you're ready to go up in weight and you've met the other two factors, then maybe it's a good time to think about going up in weight. So as you're engaging, as you're starting a program, you want to think about building just a good foundation of conditioning, strength, endurance. You don't want to think about making it too intense in the beginning phases. Even for the first month or two, really work on some higher repetitions and work your way down to some greater resistances as you progress. Once you feel you have a pretty solid foundation of strength and have gotten into working into some heavier weights and working with a lot of these exercises well under control, you may want to consider transitioning into working into some more power movements. And the difference between like power and strength, if you consider strength is the muscle's ability to move something, power is the ability to accelerate it, to move it quickly. Strength times velocity is power, and when you're looking for athletic performance, power is really what you want to strive to develop plenty of. Single joint movements versus multi-joint movements. So a single joint movement would be, an example would be the bicep curl that I was just doing, because I'm only moving one joint throughout this, and it's really targeting one muscle primarily. Not to say that the forearms aren't getting engaged and holding the weight. The shoulders are getting a little engaged as stabilizer muscle groups, which essentially means they're kind of isometrically contracted to help stabilize the arm and such. But a multi-joint movement, an example of a multi-joint movement that also hits the bicep, would be the dumbbell row. So here you can see I'm going to be bending at the elbow again, but I'm also bending up here at the shoulder. This joint is moving as well, which means these muscles in the back are getting much more engaged. They're not just isometrically contracted anymore as stabilizers. They're isotonically contracting and getting a much more of a workout through their range of motion. So the benefit I find of that, I tend to work personally with a lot more of the multi-joint movement exercises because one of the big benefits there is efficiency. You're able to target more muscle groups with one exercise. So that's not to say that the single joints don't have benefit. I personally, I call them auxiliary exercises. They're the sorts of things that I supplement my program with. I look at those as if I want to target specific areas, for example, or if I just have a little extra time at the end of a workout, I want to just add something to give the muscle groups that I've been targeting just something extra. Those are the kinds of places I tend to throw in the single joint movements. Other than that, personally, I tend to focus a lot more on multi-joint movements, as I say, because a matter of efficiency. Comes down to how much time you want to put into these things. If you have a lot more time, then you may want to explore a lot more of the single joint exercises in depth. Anyways, the last thing that you want to consider is having a good variety. One of the big things you don't want to get caught up in is a stale routine where you're just kind of going through the same motions over and over again. Most of the growth and development really gets stimulated better when the muscles are kind of kept off guard. They really don't know what's coming at them. So it's a good idea to shake up your routine every few weeks. Doesn't mean you have to do a total revamping of it, but for example, after I've done squats for 3 or 4 weeks, I might turn around and do some leg lifts instead, or lunges instead, just a different exercise that hits the muscles in a little bit of a different way. So, always being willing to shuffle your routine around and add new ideas is important. Anyways, that about wraps it up for this video. I hope that you have found it useful and beneficial. Thank you very much. Domo arigato. Sayonara.